Hi, I'm Bobby Halton with Fire Engineering Magazine, Fire Rescue, Firefighter Nation, FireEngineering.com, and Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Ryan Starling. Ryan was the first due tactical medic last Wednesday at the horrific terrorist attack in San Bernardino. Ryan will tell you his story today. He'll talk to you a little bit about the events of that day as much as he can. It's still under investigation by the federal government, the local authorities, and people who have sworn to protect us. So there are things Ryan cannot and will not speak about. But first and foremost, on behalf of Ryan and myself, Ryan would like to let you know, and I would like to let you know, that this is about those 14 Americans who lost their lives that day. Many, many diverse and different backgrounds, many, many diverse and different faiths, nationalities, and genders, who were just going to work, who were celebrating a Christmas party, exercising their freedom of religion, exercising their freedom of association, and enjoying the blessings of this great and unique nation, who were gunned down in a senseless act of terrorism by a misguided Islamic extremist, terrorist, an evil man who does not represent the face of Islam or Muslim Americans or Muslims around the world, but a perverted and misguided representation of that religion. 14 people lost their lives. 21 people were injured, and hundreds more employees of the county of San Bernardino will be forever affected in ways that those of us who have never gone through something like this could hardly imagine. This is the greatest act of terrorism on U.S. soil since 9/11. Is it a harbinger of things to come? One would hope not. Through our wonderful law enforcement efforts and our great American ethics and values, hopefully we can prevent things like this from happening in the future. But perhaps not. So we need to be prepared. We need to be realistic. There is evil in this world, and there are people who want to do bad things, and that may never change. But before we get to Ryan and Ryan's story, I'd like to make a special thank you to Tenkata. Tenkata is a company who truly understands the fire service. Tenkata leads the world in the manufacture of textiles and is producing cutting-edge fabrics for decades. They were willing to step up to sponsor this today. They do things for the fire service that you might never hear of. From the very beginning of their inception, from their resources to their track record of landmark technology, Tenkata has been a driving force in change, in safety, and innovation. Tenkata fabrics supplied the very first Aramid fabrics to the fire service, and they still continue to lead in fire-resistant fabrics today. As a business group, they're headquartered in the Netherlands, and their experience goes back almost 300 years. They have 4 manufacturing plants here in the United States in Atlanta, and we'll be broadcasting there in January, live from Tenkata's research lab. But all the fabrics that American firefighters make are made in America by the 500 dedicated American employees right here in America. They were the very first people to get Aramid fabrics to a fire department, and that was our good friends in Cleveland. Since then, their fabrics have been innovative in wildland, in technical rescue, in structural firefighting, respected worldwide for their aggressive research and development. Tenkata has set the pace for superior flame-resistant fabrics for emergency responders. You know, 7 out of 10 of us wear Tenkata fabrics, and it's fascinating. One of the most important aspects of Tenkata, and this is the only thing I'm going to say about them during this broadcast, is that there are no chemicals infused into their fabrics. There's a very disingenuous statement that's often made about the life of the garment, and this refers to the protection of the garment that cotton blends have that's infused to them by chemicals, flame-retardant chemicals that are infused. But they can wear off over time and due to laundry, especially if it's done incorrectly. Chemically treated cotton blends don't come with an indicator as to when that protection's been washed out. You can't see when it's gone. But you don't have to worry about that with Tenkata fire-resistant fabrics because all their textiles are inherently flame-resistant. No chemicals are infused. The fiber blend is there. You know, they say at Tenkata that if an archaeologist dug up their fabric 100 years from now, it would still be flame-resistant. So on behalf of myself and Ryan, we'd like to thank Tenkata for allowing us to bring this to you today. That's the only announcement they asked us to make. Please go visit their website. Please thank them for allowing us to do this. We need to thank the people who support us, and no one supports the fire service as well as Tenkata. So on behalf of myself and Ryan, Tenkata, thank you for allowing us to be here. Ryan, welcome to Fire Engineering, and welcome to today's webcast.
Thank you for having me.
Ryan, tell us a little bit about the community of San Bernardino. A lot of I was raised on the East Coast, and as a young person on the East Coast, I thought that every single person in California had the ocean in their front yard. So tell us a little bit about your community, your city, and what life is like in San Bernardino.
Um, San Bernardino is a very, very unique city. It's a beautiful city. It's got the mountains close by. You can be at a ski resort in about 35, 40 minutes. You can be at the beach in about 30, 45 minutes. It's a very, it's about a 200-year-old city developed as it transitioned from like LA and expanded out. That's how San Bernardino slowly started getting developed. Currently, with the fire department's been around in San Bernardino for about 137 years, and it has transitioned from what we know of the fire service to where it is now, to a top-rate-notch fire department. We have a very diverse community. It's a lower-income community. We've had some of the largest natural disasters and biggest incidents in our city, from the Panorama Fire to the Old Fire. We had the Duffy Street incident, which was a train derailment with the toxic chemicals that were spilled, which 5 to 7 days later caused a gas line to burst and rupture, which killed multiple people. After the Old Fire, we had a mudslide on Christmas Day that came down through a camp, and we had multiple deaths. It's a very, very diverse community with lots of potential. So it's a city that it's beautiful, a very close, tight-knit community. As you can see from this event, the whole community's come together. It's overwhelming to see the love of humans, and what in a tragic situation that how a community that we are can come together that way. It's a great city.
I've been to San Bernardino a few times. I've always found it to be a lovely place. Do you know how many citizens live in the city of?
I believe we're around 200,000. Don't quote me on that, but around 200,000.
Wow, and to me, it's the quintessential California town, suburb of LA, but it's one of those quintessential, California type towns where it really has that California look and feel to it. Now, I understand that the city fire department is going to be incorporating with the county fire department due to the current financial situation in California, that you're going to be blending into the county?
Yes, there's a vote by the council made to outsource our fire department due to financial reasons. Everybody's seen it across the nation, that there's, with the recession, with everything going on, to save costs and provide better service, provide what's best for the citizens, and that's what our administration and city leaders believe that is best for the community, and that's what they're doing.
Well, hopefully they'll retain all of the great men and women of the San Bernardino Fire Department within that structure. I couldn't imagine, given the quality of response that organization for 137 years has provided to the community, that anything shy of that would be acceptable. For 137 years, they've shown selfless service, they've shown dedication, they've shown excellence, they've just shown the greatest example of what the American Fire Service has to offer to a community, and that was just brilliantly apparent in the way that you all handled yourselves last week. How long have you been employed by San Bernardino, Ryan?
I've been with San Bernardino with the fire department for 11 years. And
Outstanding.
I've been a tactical medic with the police department for 5 years.
Oh, now that's an important question for everybody listening. What exactly is a tactical medic?
A tactical medic, the way it works for our county in San Bernardino County and through our city police department is you go through the police academy, the Reserve Police Academy, and then you go through a full post background, and you are sworn in as a reserve police officer with San Bernardino with the police department. From that, you start training with the police department on their tactical team, their SWAT team, and then you proceed through there. You go through. They have an EMS SWAT school that they go through, where they train you on EMS in tactical situations, rescuing, or you can go through a SWAT school that some of the other SWAT members go through. So you kind of can go through either one, and then have the EMS portion of the tactical portion of being a SWAT medic.
Wow, how long does that process take?
It could take anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years. It just depends on the background process, the academy, your training, what level team you are. But it took me about a year and a half.
Wow. So once you get done with the training, how does it work when you're on duty? In other words, how are you deployed? How do you store your gear? How does a tactical medic integrate into the fire department in order to be available to the police department on events such as you went to last week?
We're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So if there's a tactical situation where the SWAT team is required, we're notified and we respond in. If I'm at home, I respond in. If I'm on duty, I respond there. Just like an emergency call that would come out for the fire department, I transition from that into a reserve police officer with the SWAT team as a medic with them. So it's a response, and what we have to do is if we're on the engine that day, we get backfill, and somebody comes in and covers my spot while I'm with the team for that emergency call, because that is the known emergency at the time.
So you actually, if you were on duty, say on engine 5, and a call came in, you would go to your POV, respond with the SWAT team, and then they would backfill your position on the engine.
Yes, I actually have a car provided by the department that I can respond in, and store my gear and be able to secure things.
Oh, outstanding, outstanding. That sounds like a great program. And is it in California? I know we had a team in Albuquerque, and I know there were teams throughout Texas. Is it commonplace to have tactical medics in every organization, or is San Bernardino an exception to the rule, or more the rule?
No, we have tactical medics, and we have tactical SWAT doctors and SWAT nurses across the whole state. It's become through TIMS, it's become a industry standard, and they've seen the necessity because of events like this, because of officers going down. California's done a phenomenal job of recognizing the need for that and putting the program together.
So I imagine that you would actually deploy on things like high-risk warrants and other volatile situations where an officer could be at high risk.
Yes.
Outstanding. Now, as a tactical medic, what's the primary responsibility of a tactical medic? Is it the protection of the team members, or is it the care of the injured and wounded?
It's the protection of the team members. I'm there for my fellow law enforcement officers in that situation. If there's an officer, if everybody's safe and there's a wounded civilian, I can render aid to them as well.
Outstanding. That's a wonderful program, and I think that probably a model that subsequent to this event is going to get much more interest across the United States. I know that I first heard about it back in the mid-'90s in New Mexico, and I know the Albuquerque Fire Department had a program, but I think that it's well-deserved and well-warranted, and certainly makes a lot of sense. And obviously its value was borne out last week. Ryan, if you feel like it and you're okay with it, Do you mind taking us back to last week and the morning of the terrorist attack? And if you wouldn't mind, um, just tell us what you were doing and what was going on, and then just kind of slowly walk us through the day, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I just got done with a 24-hour shift with the fire department. So I was getting off duty that morning at 0800 and had to respond for, we actually had SWAT training that day. We have 10-hour SWAT training, and we try to train every other Wednesday. So I responded to the PD station, did our little debrief, and we went up to our training location in the north part of our city. It just happened to be that day was active shooter training, and we were actually training on active shooter.
Wow.
We ran through two scenarios. Each time we run through a scenario, we have different type of scenarios. We try to create different things that could possibly happen. And we were debriefing on our second scenario when the call came out on the radio. We heard it through our lieutenant's HT. And call came out, multiple shots fired, multiple victims down. And he just immediately just said, go. We ran to our vehicles. We were already dressed in our gear because we were training. We had everything ready to go. We just had to swap out our simunition guns for our and place our full rifles into place for live ammo. And then we responded code 3 down to the location where the call came in at. It took us about 10 minutes response time from where we were at, code 3 to the facility. At that point, I'm just listening to the radio traffic. The amazing thing was that we were training that day, so we were already had the mindset of active shooter. It was fresh in our mind. It allowed us to process everything and come up with a great game plan on the way there. The law enforcement did a phenomenal job with their quick response. Our officers were phenomenal. They put out on the radio where the location was, where they found victims, where the best entrance was, the best egress, and so we could get in. And we had so much information in that 10 minutes that I was en route because of the law enforcement and what they did, that I knew where to enter, where to park when I got there, and we were able to rapidly get in because of all that information.
If you don't mind me interrupting you a little bit here, just so you can educate us all, we all know about active shooters, the Columbine massacre, the Newton massacre, the other horrific events that have happened. Law enforcement, you have changed your operating procedures based upon those events. So when you're doing your active shooter training, can you tell us what's changed, and is it okay to talk about that, about what you do differently now versus what happened at those events?
We haven't really changed anything. Our whole goal is we need to save lives. We need to eliminate the threats immediately, so there's no further life loss, and that's our whole goal on an active shooter.
Okay, so when you arrived, your 10 minutes response, you're just getting to the facility, and some law enforcement was already there?
Yes, yeah. There was multiple law enforcement already there. They already started their job. They started going through, clearing the building, looking for the threat. We don't know if the active shooter's still there. At that time, it's a dynamic situation. You're gathering as much information as you can, and you're trying to figure out the game plan and if the shooter's still there, where the location is of the shooter, because all we're trying to do is prevent further life loss. So that's what those officers were doing. They're systematically clearing and looking for the threat to eliminate the threat so nobody else is injured. I got there with my partner, immediately came in through the east entrance, and we started a systematic looking on that first floor. I teamed up with the rest of my SWAT team, and we started clearing rooms. Once I knew the first floor was cleared, I got with the lieutenant that was back in the main room, and from there I transitioned from that to EMS to triaging the multiple victims that were down. So it allowed, with the law enforcement, it allowed them, because they were finishing and clearing, I knew that at least that first floor was safe, and we could perform a function to get those people out, get them to fire personnel and EMS personnel, and do a rapid triage, because it is a hot dynamic situation, and we want to prevent further life loss. So I just started a systematic triage to get as many people help using the national standard of START triage, going through systematically each patient that was in there.
A little bit about START, just so the folks remember, our audience is very diverse. As you can imagine, we have folks listening in from looking at the demographics right now on our screen that are manufacturers. We have folks listening in that are firefighters, law enforcement, EMS people. Tell me how the START system works and how you employed it that day.
With START triage, you have a mass casualty incident, which is an MCI. There's an overwhelming amount of people for the responders to do, so they have to do the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. So we use what's called START triage, and we go through systematically and classifying each patient under a category of walking wounded, delayed, immediate, or deceased. And that way we can get them the proper treatment as fast as possible and get them to the proper hospital as fast as possible. So as I go through, I'm looking at as I approach any patient, I'm looking at their skin color. I'm looking at their respirations. Are they breathing? If they're not breathing, I'm adjusting their airway. If they're not breathing from then, I have to move on. If there's a pulse, I take 5 to 10 seconds for the American Heart Association to check for a pulse. If there's no pulse, you move on. You want to systematically go through and do it as rapidly as possible. That way you're doing the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. If you have potentially 30 to 35 victims down, if you spend a minute on each victim, that takes 35 minutes. So we need to do a systematic approach using that START triage under the national standard to rapidly do that, to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of these people, so we can have the best probability of survival for all those victims.
And that's what you had. You had 35 people who were either shot or deceased.
I'm not sure the exact number that were in the room from that point. I know that a lot of that's still
it's still up.
Dynamic under investigation and stuff. But I treated multiple victims.
Wow.
Triage multiple victims.
So you're in the room triaging at this point, and it's basically just you still at this point.
Yes. After I knew I branched off to triage, I basically went back where I came in so I could do a systematic triage. Because there was multiple victims, I didn't want to duplicate my efforts. I found that I normally carry in our Bearcat, which was our armored vehicle, my black medic bag. I carry a bunch of medic stuff on my vest itself for an officer going down. And then I have my black bags, which has multiple trauma dressings, multiple other stuff, and triage tags. Due to the rapid response, I didn't have triage tags with me. So to go through, because it is a still hot zone, we want to get those patients out as fast as possible so there's no further injury. I went through, and as I marked, as we came across victims, and they were deceased, I took out tape, because I had medical tape with me just to mark, so I knew who I treated, because there were so many that I didn't go back and duplicate my efforts and prolong any other triage.
So you're working on triage. You're by yourself still, basically. As I understand from looking at some of the reports, there was an IED found and you evacuated and came back in. Is that how it went, or did I misread that?
There was a bomb found in the building, yes.
And then, so did that have to? Did you and law enforcement have to evacuate and come back in, or did folks stay in, or how does that play out?
No, we finished what we were doing. We didn't know. We were unaware of that till later in the incident.
Wow. So you're doing triage. The rest of the response comes. What did San Bernardino send in terms of a response? How does the community? How does that work? Is there a standard response that you have previously set up for MCIs, or is there a special call for active shooter, or how did that play out?
What happened is our IC for the fire department did a phenomenal job. He immediately requested multiple engines, 25 ambulances, and got as many people there as he could possible, and that way they were staging ready to go. Um, it just depends on how many patients you have, what the IC will respond. We knew we had multiple patients, so we got as many resources started. He did, got as many resources started as possible. Because the building was so large and there's so many employees there, and the situation dynamic can continue to change. We don't want to be behind the curve, so he immediately got as many resources there as possible from surrounding departments, surrounding agencies, throughout the county.
Right. And I know there are many people out there that have questions for you. If you have a question, please use Twitter and go to hashtag FETalk, and we have folks standing by who'll send those questions into Ryan and I. That's hashtag FETALK, and Ryan can answer. He will answer. So very dynamic situation. You are inside triaging, multiple patients with various degrees of injury, and the bad guys are still at loose, and so that's a continuing threat. I mean, there's many other buildings that are in that complex. As I looked at it on Google Earth, how did that dynamic play into it? How do you? I guess I'm asking you questions that you might not be able to answer, but how would one of us responding determine, or law enforcement determine, where the safe staging zone is for folks like me that are not trained like you, and how to protect ourselves with a weapon?
The amazing thing about this is that my SWAT team, my SWAT sergeant, I teach active shooter with them on the EMS side of it. They teach the active shooter to law enforcement, to fire, and they also teach it to civilians. And they actually taught all those county employees at that facility the year prior. Yeah, and this is just, I like to think, it's a divine intervention, but God was watching over this whole incident. It's just incredible, the things that fell into place, how well the guys acted, from law enforcement to fire to dispatch to EMS to the doctors, the nurses, and most of all, those county employees. They were heroic, absolutely heroic. The stories I'm hearing now, they were heroes. My SWAT sergeant and a couple other guys on the SWAT team went through and trained all those county employees on active shooter, and they teach them, you have to make a decision. You either have to run, you either have to hide, or you have to fight. If you run, if you're near an exit, you get out as quick as possible. If you have to hide, you barricade yourself in a room, barricade the door to not allow the active shooter to come in. They did exactly what they were trained to do.
Wow.
In law enforcement and fire, we're trained for stressful situations. We're trained to be able to react and adapt and overcome. They're not trained that way, but they remembered their training from one day in this stressful situation, and were able to help and save each other. One of them pulled the fire alarm to allow everybody to know, hey, there's an emergency in the building, exactly what they were trained to do. Because of their actions, they saved multiple lives themselves. It's true heroism on all those county employees.
Oh, God bless you. I've been watching the 24-hour news coverage, as I think everybody else has, and that's the first time I've heard someone so eloquently describe the actions of the actual employees that day. That's
true heroes.
So that training, does the fire department participate in that training when they go in and teach about active shooter? Do they assist law enforcement when law enforcement conducts that training, or is that done separately?
When they teach office companies and groups and civilians, the law enforcement does that side of it. When we do active shooter training, we do it together, joint with law enforcement. We actually trained about a year and a half ago prior to this incident at one of the local high schools, and we went through 3 days of training with law enforcement, and each day we did something different. That way we could learn what is best going to suit, because every situation is different. And if you have a large commercial occupancy, it's a lot harder, which is a large warehouse or a large office building, multiple stories. It changes everything because you can have victims all over. You're going to have to, we have litter bear where you have to carry those victims. How are you going to do that? How are you going to evac? It's constantly changing. Or if it's a school, now you have children. Now you have a large campus. They can be anywhere. So
and, and innovating and creating and adapting on the fly. Could you describe a little bit for the folks in the audience? We had a discussion before we went on air about the creativity of the law enforcement community in assisting the fire department in the treatment, transport, and triage of these multiple victims.
Absolutely. When I was performing my triage, the law enforcement officers were taking the victims out to the curb, and multiple law enforcement officers were extremely heads up. They grabbed pickup trucks, they grabbed unmarked police cars, and they utilized our Bearcat. I mean, they did exactly what they were trained to do, and they performed it flawlessly. They were, as I triaged, they were taking the patients outside and getting them loaded up and driving them right to the triage and treatment area that the fire department had set up. And that way they could do a full triage, full treatment, and get them to the appropriate facilities. I mean, it was this. I describe it as a Jenga piece, a Jenga game.
Okay.
We remove one piece, and part of it would have crumbled. Everybody intertwined, from dispatch staying extremely calm, letting us know what we had, getting the resources there, from the incident commander on law enforcement, getting all the resources there, getting it organized, from the IC on the fire department, from these law enforcement officers being heads up and getting the pickup trucks to put multiple victims in there to get them to fire as rapidly as possible, to those county employees again doing what they did to prevent further life loss, to we had the Sheriff's Air Rescue get up right away. And later in the incident, I actually had one of the paramedics off of Sheriff Air Rescue come in and help me finish triaging and treating. I mean, everybody did exactly what they were trained to do and worked cohesively. I mean, it was phenomenal.
Wow. And I apologize. It's amazing to listen to you, and we have a lot of questions coming in on FE Talk, hashtag FE Talk, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, and what Ryan can answer, he certainly will. But I'm still kind of in the moment, picturing in my head these men and women, these employees and these law enforcement officers, and yourself, responding to this. Can you give us a sense, just from your perspective, as because you really don't know if the shooters have left the building yet. You don't know that's still hanging over your heads at this point. Can you explain or describe? Because I'm caught up in the moment. What it was, what the almost like what the environment felt like to you. I mean, what you were, because it sounds like your professionalism and your training and your focus was enabling you to deal with emotional and psychological factors that could paralyze people, but that was not happening.
Yeah, that's why it's so important in our industry is training. Day in and day out, we train and we learn every single day, and we constantly try to improve for all the people we serve. I mean, we're servants. That's what we do, and we need to do our job to the best of ability. I just remember walking in, and I remember there was a sprinkler pipe that was busted, that was flowing water everywhere. I remember that was washing down a little bit of blood that we had to walk through, so it was almost kind of like a little river of blood. I remember hearing moans and screams. I remember the smell, because if you go to the range, you get that smell of the gunpowder when you fire a lot, and that smell was still in the room. You don't think about any of that. You don't think about anything. You become, in a way, tunnel visioned and focused on the task at hand. And that's what training does for you. The more you train, the better you train. When you come to a stressful situation, you always revert what you've learned, and that's how you perform. And that's what everybody did that day. And you never saw anybody panic. You never saw anybody. Everybody was moving efficiently, effectively, in a calm manner in such a stressful situation. Um, it was. I'm truly, truly proud of and blessed to be a part of San Bernardino City Fire Department, San Bernardino Police Department, and all the local surrounding agencies. I mean, they performed incredible. We
Right.
I just got some stats the other day when I was meeting with our EMS coordinator, and we're still gathering all this information and trying to figure out everything. But we had 14 critical patients, and we had all 14 critical patients once they reached fire at triage and on and off scene in under 15 minutes.
Wow. What?
Uh,
Wow.
we had 17 patients that were transported there from the triage area, and they were on and off scene in under 17 minutes.
So that's medical minutes too. That's from receipt of call, right?
Yes, our goal in EMS is we have what's called the golden hour. From the time the incident occurs, the injury occurs, we try to get that person to the hospital to a surgeon in under that hour, and that gives them the best survivability rate. Our first critical patient was approximately about 40 minutes to the hospital, and we had all our critical patients transported to an emergency room hospital in under an hour.
Wow. Wow.
And that's because of the county employees. That's because of law enforcement. That's because of our dispatch. That's because of the quick thinking of our firemen, everybody.
And really, it also tremendous credit should go to the folks that have managed your city that had the foresight to allow the fire chief and the police chief to have a tactical medic program, who had the foresight to allow that kind of training to go on within the county buildings and the other buildings that you protect. I mean, it's a real testament to a great community at every single level, and I'm still in the moment, and we have a lot of questions coming in. And I promise you, I'll start hitting Ryan with your questions in a minute here. But I'm still on scene with you, Ryan, as all of this is going on. So in about 45 minutes or so, the last patient is off scene, pretty much.
I don't know the exact time, so I don't want to quote that. But
Right.
all I can say is that we had everybody, all the critical patients to the hospital in under that hour. Yes.
So as that's going on, it's still a very volatile scene. That at that point, it's pretty. So at this point, I'm assuming that they know that the bad guys, that the terrorists, have left the area, or not, or are no longer at least attacking. What happens then? In other words, walk us through the demob. In other words, you've got all of these county employees, you've got all of this going on, you've got evidence preservation, you've got reports to take. Walk us through a little bit of the demob, and then we'll get into the questions that are coming up.
Um, yeah, that goes down to our magnificent incident commander, our police chief, our fire chiefs, um, getting that organized, figuring out, getting resources there for all the county employees because they just saw something unbelievably horrific. Getting resources there for our law enforcement, getting resources there for our fire department. Basically, our whole goal is protecting and saving more lives, and that's what they focused on and getting all those resources there. Everybody has a task, and they just start calling for the world and getting everything there that we need for evidence collection. For that, it's a long, lengthy process, and these chiefs, these ICs, know their training and know what they do, and that's their. I can't speak too much on all of it and how they do it and what they do because I'm not in that position, but it happened so fast and in such a timely manner. It is truly, truly incredible, and they're true professionals.
Now have all the responders and the and the victims, have they been afforded opportunities for debriefings and counseling and things of that nature?
I can't speak on everybody, but I can speak on behalf of the fire department. All of our chiefs have put everybody through critical stress debriefing. Yes.
And I hope everybody took great pains to do that. Um, just an amazing story, Ryan. Do you mind if we go through some of the questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. One of the Twitter questions asked, do you have any idea why initially it was reported as three terrorists and where there was only two? And I know a lot of that probably has to do with just the fog of a horrific event like this, but do you have any insight on that at all?
I don't know. I don't know anything as far as that goes. That'd be something you'd have to refer back to our PIO through the police department. Um, they get reports of multiple things, and they're trying to gather and process that information. As far as any of that goes, I can't comment on that because I have no knowledge of that. So
Okay. Well, that's perfectly understandable, and I think a lot of that just has to do. It's like a car accident. You know, everybody sees things a little bit differently, and they might see the same person twice and think it's three people. There's a lot. They call it the fog of war, and I call it the fog of the fireground. But I could see where people could get easily confused. Here's a very interesting question: how was the communication between PD and FD, and were there any private EMS involved, or any other agencies that haven't been really discussed much in the media that contributed, like Public Works or anything like that?
yeah, the way we work off an 800 megahertz system, and PD has their channels and we have our channels, and then what they do is they set up a command post, and we have representatives from each agency at the command post, and that way they can communicate efficiently and effectively, because as we know in the fire service, law enforcement, the best communication is face-to-face verbal. That way nothing's lost in transition or translation, and that's what we do on every incident, and that's what occurred there. So from that command post, having our law enforcement and fire at the command post communicating and being able to put it out on both radios for our fire channel and their channel, it was crucial, and they did a phenomenal job at that. Everybody keeps describing it as like organized chaos, but it was. I mean, for that situation and how fast and effective it got done, it's truly phenomenal. And I attributed that to communication and our training, and like our departments and the cities allowing us to do this training, like you said before, having trained on it multiple times, we enacted our training, and through our brothers and sisters, there's multiple lives saved because of that.
It's fantastic. Here's another question for you, Ryan, if you don't mind. In an MCI scenario, with the scene not fully secure, what is the most efficient way of evacuation of patients who need assistance?
There's multiple ways. We teach, if it's a single rescuer and you have to drag one person out, we teach you can come up underneath the arms and cross the arms and then grab the wrists this way, and so you can lift the patient up, because if you're just dragging a patient, there's a lot of friction on the ground and you're just dragging just weight. Whereas you lift them up, you can actually walk with them and take steps and hold them, and you have a good locked-in grip. There's other multiple ways of using. We have mega movers. They're big white tarps with multiple handles, so you can put the victim on a mega mover, and you can actually drag them on that. Or if you have multiple rescuers, you can actually carry them with that in an efficient manner. So there's multiple ways of getting a victim out of that area, and we want to get that victim out of that area as fast as possible for their safety and for our safety.
In tactical medical training, as I remember from some of the men and women who went through it while I was in command, you are actually taught how to protect someone during an active shooter event so that you can supply aid or evacuate. Isn't that part of your TAC medic training?
Absolutely.
And that's invaluable. I mean, that's absolutely, because as you said, there's that golden hour where you need to get people who are, say it was a law enforcement officer who was wounded, as one of them were at the shootout, and that was another part of it. Were you part of there was a shootout that occurred off-site with the terrorists, and there's been some speculation that they were returning back to detonate their bomb. or bombs. But that aside, were you involved in that event as well, Ryan? Or
Yes, I responded on the Bearcat for the officer down. That's what we trained to do. Being a tactical medic to be able to render aid to that officer. So we responded on the Bearcat as a rescue team to rescue that downed officer because there was still shots being fired. So that's what we responded over there to. The officer was able to self-rescue and give his own aid and continue in the gunfight, which is unbelievably heroic.
I read that he extracted himself, repositioned his cover, and continued to engage the terrorists.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I mean, these are truly the most courageous American stories we've heard since 9/11, and no bones about it. Just amazing, the heroism of the employees, as you were commenting on, the county officials, the law enforcement, fire, just an amazing display of true American heroism, and I don't know how else to say it. Unbelievable. Here's another question that came in from Twitter. Could you describe a little bit about the training that you do at the hospitals and how the hospitals were trained and prepared and how they managed so many people, dozens of injured people? Can you discuss that a little bit?
Absolutely. My co-engineer actually was one of the first engines on scene. He was on a backfill day, and before they even got on scene, he had instructed, because he's a paramedic as well, instructed the medic to get on the radio and call comm center. The way our comm center is we have what's called ReadyNet, so they can send out. We notify them, hey, we have a mass casualty incident, and we need bed availability. So that way the hospitals are notified ahead of time what we have and how many is coming. So they send out to each hospital, said, hey, we have a mass shooting, we need to know your bed availability, how many criticals you can take, how many immediate you can take, and how many delayed you can take. And they send that information back to comm center, and then they get it back to us. So before we were even on scene, because of those two heads-up medics, we had bed availability for all the patients and where they were going to, and what the destination was going to be for our critical, immediate, and delayed patients.
Wow.
The hospitals, I can't speak on what they do, but I know they do training on that all the time in the ERs. They do training on all different kinds of scenarios. So they're prepared as well through their training.
Outstanding. That just amazing stuff. So I just want to take you back to training and learning. What were some of the lessons learned? What were some of the takeaways that you're allowed to share with us? I'm sure there's some that you want to keep confidential. But what can you share with us about lessons learned for your organization from these two separate but obviously related events?
Yeah, every active shooter we've had, we want to take from it, and I've learned from them, from Columbine, from Sandy Hook, from Virginia Tech. We take all those scenarios and we learn from them, and to allow us to serve the community and to act in an efficient manner. That way we can perform better in the law enforcement service and the fire service. The one thing that I did take from this is we need to look at MCI. Normally with the fire service and MCI, we have a bus crash. We can pull right up to the bus crash and we can start triaging. It's a totally different and a dynamic situation when we have an active shooter, because there is a hot zone. We need to look at different kinds of triage, as far as like a rapid triage like I did, getting the victims out quick as possible to get them to fire personnel, because it's a safety issue. It's a safety for the officers, it's a safety for them, and we got to prevent further life loss. When I triage them using the tape, we transitioned. What I carry now is electrical tape, and I carry different colors of electrical tape, like the triage tags. So I have black electrical tape, I have red electrical tape, green electrical tape, and red electrical tape. So that way I can wrap it around real quick around the victim's wrist, so I can tell, since I was the only guy in there, I can tell officers that are with me, drag this patient out with the red, drag this patient out with the red, drag this patient out with the red. That way I can instruct the officers that might not have any training on MCI or triage, and we can work together efficiently to do the greatest good for the greatest amount of people.
Wow, wow. Uh, we just got a question in from Twitter, and I'm sure this relates to the LA Times article, which we published yesterday or a day ago on fire engineering and on Firefighter Nation. And it had to do with one of the captains on your job saying that because of the nature of what was going on and the criticality of the situation, that he opted to move his personnel, as you described earlier, into the situation maybe a little earlier than you normally would. And he said, so the question from Twitter is, does San Bernardino send fire department personnel into the hot zone to treat and triage prior to securing the scene? And other than you, Ryan, I think that's where this is. If I'm misrepresenting your Twitter question, please resend it. I'll be happy to rephrase the question, but that's how I understand the question.
Yeah, normally the fire department personnel doesn't have any equipment. They're unable to protect themselves. They don't carry vests. They don't carry helmets. They don't go in the hot zone. They rely on law enforcement to bring the patients to them. It just happened that I was there that day, and call it fate, call it what you want. I think it was God watching over those county employees, allowing me to be there to be able to triage those patients to get them out rapidly, and then having the law enforcement officers such a quick response to get them out. So no, normally they do not go into the hot zone, but just because of the dynamic situation and where it was, I was able to escort 3 of them in undercover to help finish triaging, because there was word that there was potentially more victims. We didn't know. There was a dynamic situation, so there was a need for more help if we had further victims coming in from adjacent buildings or wherever. So
that clears it up for me as well, Ryan, because now knowing that you, a trained law enforcement officer, armed, you were providing cover for those other San Bernardino firefighters, medics that came in. So when I read the LA Times article, that wasn't clear to me, and I think that's where this Twitter person was coming from as well. So you were actually there protecting your brother and sister firefighters.
yes.
That's outstanding. Ryan, I want to give you a couple of minutes for any recommendations before we wrap up that you might have. And America is a large and diverse nation, and oftentimes people try to think about America like their own hometown. You know, like if they're a New Yorker, they think all of America is like New York or New Jersey or Connecticut or Oregon or wherever. But we're very diverse, and I think that is what makes us such a powerful and such a wonderful place to live is our diversity and our nuances. But this is a threat that if it can happen in San Bernardino, if it can happen in Newton, if it can happen in Arkansas, where the terrorist attacked and killed the people at the recruiting station, it can happen anywhere, in my opinion. So what are your recommendations to your fellow firefighters and law enforcement officers who are watching today and who may be watching this in archive going forward? What are some of your thoughts about how communities can, large and small, can move forward in being more prepared should terrorism strike there, or an active shooter or an act of violence hit their community?
I just think that we need to focus in on our training, and continue to train, continue to improve on what we do, and not live in fear. This is a community, this is a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and we have a job to do, and we need to do it to the best of our ability. And I think we just focus in on our training. Training, in my opinion, is very, very key and pivotal.
Do you recommend tactical medic programs for all organizations?
I won't say all organizations, but I think it's very, very a key thing for the protection of law enforcement and the protection of um, civilians.
I agree. I think it's tantamount. Now, just so everybody knows, Ryan will be speaking at FDIC. He'll also be conducting a class. Ryan is an educator. He teaches folks about tactical medicine and active shooter. And what else do you cover, Ryan? What else do you plan on covering in your class?
Um, just the training on active shooter, the training on the fire department response, and that, um, and any other questions that anybody else has. The last thing I'd like to add, just my heart goes out to those 14 families. I can't even imagine what they're going through right now, and it's a true tragedy. And you have my heart and my deepest condolences goes out to you, those 14 families.
No, and I think that Ryan, just so everyone knows, before we went on air, Ryan said this is about those 14 families, and our thoughts and prayers, our most heartfelt thoughts and prayers are with those families in this incredibly tragic time. I can't imagine, and I want everyone to know this that this is why Ryan is doing this because he deeply cares about those people and he deeply cares about his community and America. We can't let terrorists win. We have to keep living our lives. We need to be prepared to respond, as Ryan said, through training. Um, Ryan, if you don't mind, people are flooding me with questions, and someone just said if you don't mind one or two more before we wrap up. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Um, we're and these are from our medical friends. Were tourniquets used and during this event at all?
I can't get into the treatment as for legal reasons, so I apologize, but um, I apologize.
No, no, don't apologize. Please, you're an American hero. You have nothing to apologize for. We
I'm
understand
not,
that.
I'm not a hero. I just
Oh
would agree.
no, every firefighter and law enforcement officer and military person in my mind is a hero for just joining, just for stepping up. And you exhibited the finest qualities, as did everyone else in San Bernardino that day responding, of what, as a citizen, of what I expect or what I would hope to receive. And I mean that in the most sincere way that uh, I'm so proud of you and everyone else in San Bernardino. I'm so proud of this nation. I'm so proud uh, of the men and women who make up law enforcement and fire and the military. Uh, they're the 1% of the nation that protects the other 99% and that are dedicated to serving. And you did that. The final question for you, Ryan, is how many tactical medics are normally on a team, and were there any other medics on scene with you that day?
Um, there normally it depends on the size of the team. You try to have as many tactical medics as possible. There's one other tactical doctor that's on our team. Um, I'm the only tactical medic on the team right now. Our team's been around for about 15 to 16 years, and we were trying to get more tactical medics on the team, but just due to the financial situation, it's just been a long process. When I joined the team, we had 4 on the team at that time, and they had been on the team for a while and has since resigned and basically retired. So currently, I'm the only one on the team as a medic, and then we have one other doctor on the team currently.
Wow, wow. Well, Ryan, any final thoughts you'd like to share before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank you, and I just want to reiterate about the families, the 14 families, and my heart goes out to them. The county employees what they went through, you guys are true heroes. Thank you. I just want to thank um, my law enforcement brothers and sisters, my fire department brothers and sisters, and everybody that did a phenomenal job in this horrific situation. It makes me proud to be a fireman, a police officer, and an American. To see everybody come together the way they did, it's Truly, truly phenomenal.
Well, Ryan, on behalf of myself and all the other firefighters out there, um, thank you. Thank you for your eloquence and your dedication. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for being willing to share with us. And thank you to the leadership in San Bernardino for allowing Ryan to share with us at this time and to be so candid and open about the terrific events of that day. I agree with Ryan. Those county employees, those officers and firefighters truly are heroes. Ryan, I know you don't like the firefighters always cringe when we say this, but you truly are a hero in the true sense of the word because you were willing to put yourself at risk to save your fellow citizens and to protect your fellow citizens. And you did it in a way that has brought glory and honor to your family, to yourself, to your organization, to this great nation, and this incredible industry we call the fire service. And I know my good friends at Tenkata asked me to not make it about them. They asked it to just please mention they were sponsoring it. But I have to say that if it wasn't for good folks like the folks at Tenkata, we couldn't do the things we do today. Please go to TENCATE, just Google Tenkata, TENCATE, and thank them. Thank them for helping men and women like Ryan protect us and share with us. Thank them for the great products they produce. Thank them for their dedication to producing ever better products like Ryan sharing the lessons learned today. Thank them for supporting things like this, like FDIC, places where all of these types of topics and men and women like Ryan can come together and talk about all of the incredible uh, challenges we face, as well as the incredible opportunities that we face. So please thank Tenkata for allowing us to do this. Please keep Ryan and all the men and women that responded in San Bernardino, all the wonderful county employees who were affected by this, and most importantly, the 14 beautiful American families that were tragically affected by this in your thoughts and prayers. On behalf of Fire Engineering, FDIC, Firefighter Nation, GEMS, Fire Apparatus Emergency Equipment, we'd like to thank you for sharing your time with us today. We'd like to thank you for doing what you do and for being who you are. We hope that this was of some benefit to you. We hope that if we can ever do anything for you in the future, that you'll let us know. And we wish you all the very happiest of holidays, and God bless.
Thank you.